are you wearing the San Francisco Niners hat?
Hey,
Seahawks kicked your ass.
I know, that's why I'm showing how loyal I am. I'm not a front runner.
Yeah.
And someone asked me, they said, do you root for any teams? Of course I root for teams. Like, I got into this business in the beginning. My passion was fueled like everybody else's as a sports fan. But unfortunately, my NFL team not doing well, not looking good. Everybody's hurt. I'm afraid if I have this hat on for too long, I may pull a hammy or something. We'll see.
John Canzano's with us. He joins us every Tuesday to talk college football. It's brought to you by Zeke's Pizza, best selection of pizzas and local Northwest craft beers. Visit Zeke'sPizza.com for more. You can follow John on X at John Canzano BFT, and you're on Blue Sky too, but it's just John Canzano there.
You can find me anywhere. I'm everywhere and anywhere. You know where to find me.
Read all of his work up at johncanzano.com. Weekly radio show, The Bald-Faced Truth in Portland, 7:50 The Game. Oh, yeah, you're Niners. Yeah, it's that window.
So bad. But
that window's closing.
I'll say this. I kind of wrote the Seahawks off. And then to see them make the plays, like you still have to make those plays. And that's still a good defense that's out there, even though Nick Bosa's not on the field. Like, that's a good defense out there that the Seahawks rallied against. I think it gives you a lot of hope. That division is brutal. And, I think maybe it's Arizona's division to lose, but give the Seahawks a tip of the cap, so to speak.
Yeah. All right, let's I saw your text yesterday. I'm running around doing stuff, and I'm like, what did Jake Dickert say? You're like, hey, what do you make of Jake Dickert's comments? I'm like, uh-oh. What did he say? Is he doubling down like on the stupid analytics book again? Like what is he doing? And then I went on Twitter and social media and I found the clip. For people who don't know, I'm going to play it one more time. Jake Dickert yesterday at his press conference was just asked a, I don't know, kind of generic question about Oregon State and facing them this Saturday.
Washington and Oregon State, the only two common opponents from last year to this year. How does that change, the last couple weeks preparing for somebody you guys maybe haven't faced in a couple years to now, a familiar team, like you said, new head coach?
Well, first thing, I've never gotten into they're our buddy. Oregon State's not our buddy, right? You know what I mean? They would have left us as fast as we would have left them. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. It's one of our biggest rivals now. That's the way I've looked at it. And that's not bulletin board material. I just hope they would say it the same way. Let's go compete. We've been waiting to compete with these guys, right? So they've dealt with a lot of adversity. We've dealt with a lot of adversity. I think it's going to be energized. It's going to be a great, obviously their stadium's going to be packed. I think there's going to be a lot of Cougs there, So, I think it's an energizing football game. That's what I mean by that. And to know that this is going to be an opponent that we're going to play for a long time, let's go do it. Because all the ones I've been in my 4 years here, have been heck of ball games.
All right, he goes on a little bit more, but we got the gist of it. Oregon State's not our buddies. What'd you make of it?
First of all, he wasn't asked. Like, the question wasn't, are they your buddies?
Yeah.
He veered out of the way to go answer that question. And so I think, obviously I'm going, that's something he wanted out there, that he wanted to set a tone for his team. These are not our friends. We're going to have to go smash heads with these guys. We want to beat them. Of course, Washington State coming off a real disappointing result last week against New Mexico. So he's trying to set a tone there, and I get that. But you can't say that and then say that's not bulletin board material, because you know damn well that Oregon State is poring over everything and anything, trying to find any angle it possibly can to put on the bulletin board. And that's going on the bulletin board. If you're Oregon State, you are taking Jake Dickert's words and you are putting them on the bulletin board and throwing them out there. But I don't know if that's going to matter this year, given how decimated Oregon State is, how poorly they're playing. The last 2 weeks, I really do feel like they've checked out. And so maybe he feels safe throwing that out there to the bulletin board. But is there truth in what he's saying? Absolutely. Like, all of these schools would shank each other in the back the first chance that they get if an opportunity comes along. But the truth is, Oregon State and Washington State are allies. If they're not friends, they're at least strategic allies. They're rebuilding the Pac-12, reconstituting it together. They've been in it together. The presidents and ADs have been in lockstep together. So, Jake Dickert's drawn a little bit of a line that, I think people suspected was out there. But, there's honesty in what he's saying, and I appreciate that.
There was I don't know if you saw it, and I played it earlier. I'll play it again. It's like a 25-second clip. He talked about, in the beginning of his press conference, about Oregon State, And I guess this is more in line with what people would want to hear from him.
Our Pac-12 brethren, obviously a rival of ours for a long time, got to travel there. It's a great environment. It's a tough football team. We go from playing in space the last 5 weeks to playing in a phone booth. And our physicality and toughness really has to show as a football program, because got a lot of respect for Coach Bray, got a lot of respect for the Oregon State football program. It's going to be two really hungry teams. Okay, I think both of us are obviously extremely disappointed with last week's results. It's their senior night, so I expect a heck of a ball game, and we need to bring our best this week to go out there and get it. So.
Now that's before that's in the beginning, and then he answers it later. I agree with you there, because the question wasn't, are they your buddy? You're right. I mean, he wanted that out there, and I think he wanted it out there for his team to be like, listen, we're not going to line up across from them and go, hey, let's shake hands and hug. Like, we got to kick your ass.
Yeah.
Because we got our ass kicked last week.
And Oregon State's an easy mark right now. Look, I went to Colorado Springs with them last week. They were I was down on the field before the game. It was quiet. They were warming up in silence. And I thought, gosh, that's really weird. Like, I've never heard a team just that quiet in the pregame. And so, and then they went out and they didn't score in the game, and Air Force dominated them. And so this is not the same Oregon State team that ran the ball all over Purdue earlier this year, ran the ball over Idaho State, beat some bad teams, got off to a 4-1 start. They haven't won since. This is an Oregon State team that has been decimated, that doesn't have a quarterback that can hurt you down the field, that is working with a backup running back. Offensive line's not good. They got killed in the portal. I mean, it's an example for Washington State fans of what Washington State would have looked like if Jake Dickert left. Like, you would have lost so much in the portal, in addition to the players who were like, hey, we're no longer part of the Pac-12. So it was sort of that exponential hit that Oregon State took, and it's really hurting them now because they just can't stop anybody with the defense, and they can't score. They can't move the ball. They can't complete passes down the field. And so I think this is an easy win for Washington State. I think, Jake Dickert, you're right. The only way that Washington State loses this game is if it doesn't show up to play, like it just plays flat and no emotion. And so I think Dickert really he knows that. He saw the film, all that stuff about playing in a phone booth, and that was Oregon State in the early part of the season. They just have not been the same team.
And, and they could come out flat. I mean, this is something that haunted his teams the last 2 years. They've kind of been better at it. But again, John, it's hard to listen. They were playing for something.
Yeah.
They were playing for something. I mean, even though it was a long shot, the idea that they could somehow sneak into the college football playoff was very real for them. Now that's over. And, yes, they're going to go to a bowl game, but like what? I mean, they're going to go to the Alamo Bowl. I mean, there's no conference title on the line. There's nothing. There's no, I guess, carrot for him to dangle anymore, because that was the carrot to dangle. That's
a great point. And I think it explains why he said what he said, because I don't think he sits back and wishes ill on Oregon State. He wants to beat them, but the big thing he has to defend against is his team coming out and losing back-to-back games. And, we're going to get this playoff ranking release. I'll be curious to see if, does Washington State get mentioned as they release the first few teams in the top 25? And it's not going to have the same impact as being 18th or 16th or whatever they would have ended up had they won that football game.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that when the AP rankings came out, I was surprised they were still ranked.
Yeah,
I really was. I mean, they're 25th, and but they should have had that game. They had it. They let it slip through. I think coaching was a big factor why they lost that game. What'd you make of his explanation? I mean, a lot of coaches subscribe to this book or this website, this analytics website. I thought it just choked him late. I mean, I went through it. He should have called the timeout with 1:24 to go. He should have called the timeout with 48 seconds to go, and he didn't do it, and he just let the clock wind down. And I'll say this also about New Mexico. I thought they butchered it. They're snapping the ball with 20 seconds left on the play clock. Like, I mean, Mendenhall wasn't executing it well as well. But what'd you make of the use and his explanation of the timeouts?
Well, I think we're always looking for something to lean on or lean against in tense moments where the world is swirling around us. And, we've all been in those moments where we've had to make big decisions, but coaches are in that position all the time late in football games. And I do think that they lean, I think, foolishly sometimes on that analytics book, because it gives them something concrete that they can go back and they can explain a decision with. It makes it bulletproof. Oh, the book says I should have done this. Well, the situation really didn't dictate that, because we were all watching that game. You were probably yelling at your TV. I was going, stop the clock. You got to stop the clock. You've got John Mateer. If New Mexico comes down here and takes the lead, you have to give him an opportunity to come back and tie the game or win the game. And they just didn't do that. 21 seconds left was not enough, obviously. And so, in hindsight, to his credit, he did say, even though he was saying, I lean on the book and the analytics said we should have done that, he said, I wish I would have called a timeout on the third down. But, I watched BYU in the end of their Kansas game. There was a little bit of that gamesmanship going on, too, because Kansas was calling timeout, and Kansas had an opportunity to put time back on the clock, and they were worried about BYU taking the lead at the end of their game. So I just think it was Jake Dickert leaning on the book, but knowing in his heart, I think he blew that.
Yeah, I just there's some decisions I think he's going to have to make in the offseason. I, for one, would like him to just relieve his defensive coordinator right now of his duties, whether he wants to stay on the staff or not. That's clearly up to him. I think he should take over the play calling duties on defense. Defense has been an issue all season long, and I just knew in the pit of my stomach, I knew that defense was going to cost him a game at the end of the year. I thought it'd be Oregon State the way they were playing, but I was so scared of New Mexico watching them play the week before against San Diego State because of that quarterback, and they had zero answer for him.
Well, you look at New Mexico's season; they've been in one-score games often, right? Yeah. So even though they weren't winning some of those games, they were in those games to the end, and so they proved they could do that. But I think the opener, even against Portland State, I came away going, gosh, Portland State moved the ball a little bit on Washington State. That surprised me. And so I think all along there were some indicators that the defense wasn't right. But let's go back. Like Jake Dickert faced that brutal spring and summer where he lost his offensive coordinator. He lost his defensive coordinator. He was trying to make two hires at once. That's not easy. I think, we all look back and go, hey, you got the OC correct. It looks like they're okay there. They've got a great quarterback. I think he knows and he sees what Washington State fans see on the defensive side.
I'm not sold on the OC, and I'm not so. I've never been sold on this. And next time he comes on, I'm going to ask him because it just doesn't fit with the style of play that he talks about. The air raid. It just doesn't fit him. Yeah. It's not him. It's not Midwest football. And I'm not saying they got to change and go, heavy personnel, we're running the eye. But it just doesn't fit his nature. Like he's been preaching after every game to run the ball more, and they don't run the ball more. And I just think when you are in that air raid tree, you hire guys like Ben Arbuckle, they just can't help themselves but to throw the ball. Yeah. They can't do it. Like the offense that New Mexico is running is really the offense that you should run with Mateer, because Mateer's a dual threat quarterback, and then they don't use him as a dual threat. He gets a lot of his yards on scrambles. Yeah, I mean they call some run design plays, but I don't. That's my rant.
My question there would be, how comfortable is John Mateer in that offense, and is that a selling point? If John Mateer is saying, "Hey, look, I don't love playing in this offense. I need to be in a different style offense," I'm listening. If I'm Jake Dickert, because if that's the thing that can glue Mateer to Washington State, you do it.
I mean, listen. I mean, I don't know who's the backup to Dylan Gabriel.
It's either Austin Novosad or it's the kid from the transfer from UCLA, Dante Moore.
Yeah. Like him and that, I'll tell you, Mateer and Oregon's offense.
Yeah.
It's scary. Yeah. I mean, it's zone read, use his legs, pull the ball up and throw a quick slant over the middle.
Yeah. When Oregon's playing that game, though, with the backup quarterback, they're playing it as more of a trying to preserve a redshirt year. And, so people are like, hey, if Dylan Gabriel got hurt, I think it would be Dante Moore. But if it's just a guy coming in for a series here or there to end the game, maybe it's Novosad. So everybody, I think we all know that Oregon's season ends if Dylan Gabriel gets hurt. I mean, that, knock on wood.
Yeah. What did you make of their win? Scrappy won. It was probably too close for comfort against Wisconsin.
Yeah, they played 8 straight weeks, and they were on the road for multiple weeks. They looked tired to me. They looked tired the week before against Maryland to me. And I kind of waved that off, and I go, oh, these are young guys. But they just looked fatigued, and I can't ignore it. And, I think good teams win games. I'm not as panicked as everybody else. I think every season when you look at championship teams, you look back and you find a game here or a game there that they barely survived, they escaped out of. They found a way. I didn't love the fake field goal late in the game by Dan Lanning. Kick the field goal, rely on your defense. I get it. He was trying to end the game right there, but if you're going to do that, you want to go for it, put Dylan Gabriel out there and run a play. Don't have your punter running with the football. Like that's not where it's Nolan Ryan throwing a knuckleball with a 3-2 count and the bases loaded. Like give me the heat. And so I didn't love that, but Oregon's going to get a week off and now it lines up nicely for the Ducks. Yeah. They're, potentially in this Big Ten championship game if they can beat Washington, and I think they're going to beat the pants off Washington in 2 weeks. I think they are so focused on that game because of what has happened, Dan Lanning, over the last 3 meetings, that I think Oregon's going to show up in a frenzy for that game. But I think they're getting a week off here. Then they're getting Washington. Ohio State's got to play Indiana and Michigan in the lead into that Big Ten championship game. And so I think the strategy long-term is paying off for Oregon. They're going to be number 1. They're going to be undefeated, but I think they're getting a little bit of a break here and a little bit of a respite.
What do you like in that line? I think the line I saw is 20 already. You think that goes up or down?
I think Oregon's going to be there have been some moments where you look at, you remember when Washington put, I think 50, 60, 70 on Oregon?
70 was Jake Browning down there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that kind of feel to me because there's no number that's going to be enough, because it's been 3 meetings. Washington's been that team that's been in the way of Oregon. Right. Washington's been that team that knocked Oregon out in the Pac-12 title game. Washington's been a thorn and a burr in Dan Lanning's saddle since he got to Oregon. And so I just think there's no number that is big enough on that for me not to pick Oregon. I think Oregon's going to try to lay it on Washington in a couple weeks.
He's going to try and run the score up too.
I just think it's made that way, and I think they understand the stakes, and they're good. Let's face it, they're good, and this game's at home. And so it doesn't line up for Washington. When I look at Washington's great games this year where they've had a positive result, it's when they can control the line of scrimmage. They go to Iowa, they get pushed around. They get UCLA, and they held UCLA to under 60 rushing yards and win the game. Oregon is going to run on Washington. And so I just don't see Washington being in that game.
What do you make of Jedd Fisch? I'm really curious which direction he goes in with his quarterback. He said at his press conference on Monday, I got an idea. We're going to see how they handle the week. Will Rogers and Damon Williams, Damon Williams being the freshman. But we will not make a decision, and it's a smart thing. He's got no reason to tell Oregon who to prepare for. Have them prepare for both. Which way do you think he goes with that decision?
I would be really hesitant to put a freshman in Autzen Stadium in that scenario as a starter, but let's see what Jedd Fisch does. Maybe he knows, maybe he sees what we all see, that he's got nothing to lose. He's not playing for a playoff spot, Frankly, if it comes down to who's the better player, I would expect Rogers to be on the sideline. From the beginning of the year, I think you and I talked about this. There were indicators in the Apple Cup that he wasn't the guy. So, the freshman's the better player, but do you throw him into this situation knowing it's a hostile environment? And do you accept, hey, some bad things might happen, but this is going to be a great learning experience for a young quarterback to go into that environment, knowing that could cost you a pick 6 or some miscue. I don't know. We're going to find out, but I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters who Washington starts at quarterback. There's nobody there that could lead Washington to a win over Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a thing. It's a hell of a thing to ask anyone, hey, you're going to make your first collegiate start. Hey, it's going to be down there. It's a frenzy environment. What is it? Almost 60,000 people, number 1 team in the country. They're looking for blood. See, I think the mistake for Fisch was to not do it last week.
Yeah.
See, I think Fisch should have done it last week. You're at home. It's not as a tough as opponent, UCLA, and you could have just surprised them and trotted them out there and be like, oh, my God, UCLA hasn't – because remember, there was just some whispers about it, and then you spring it on UCLA, and all of a sudden now UCLA is like, oh, my God, what do we do? We're preparing for Will Rogers, and that would have given Williams – a game under his belt, and then you go to Autzen. So I think he screwed it up.
Yeah, but if his intention is just to start Rogers all the way, maybe he didn't. Maybe his whole thing this week is just it's a red herring, right? Hey, Oregon, prepare for either guy. But I don't think it matters. I mean, bring Geno Smith. It doesn't matter. Oregon will beat Washington at Autzen Stadium in 2 weeks. And
yeah,
I'm not out on a limb there.
No, I don't think you're out on a limb. A successful season, do you think? This has been kind of a topic this week. Let's say they go finish 6-6. Is that a successful year under Jedd Fisch?
It is, but I think we're finding out from these coaches like Kenny Dillingham at Arizona State, like the job is building the roster, right? And so he inherited, I think, low expectations from Washington fans who were coming off a magical season and getting to a bowl game. I think you save face with that. You can recruit to that. Washington's got resources. It belongs in the Big Ten. So now the job is, what does Jedd Fisch do from here to next spring and then into fall camp? Like, that's the job. Kenny Dillingham mastered that job. You look at the coach at SMU, mastered that transition. Indiana's coach mastered the transition. So here's the job. That's what the money's for. Like the 6-6 thing is going to be on your record, but Jedd Fisch, whether or not he's a success at Washington, it's the next 3 or 4 months that is going to tell the story, because if he can get guys, if he can fortify the defensive line and get better on in the trenches where they have been suspect all year, then he's going to come out of this looking great. But it's enough. It saves face. It's 6 wins.
How surprised are you? I mean, last year we mocked it because how they started off the season, then how they finished, and a lot of us, including myself, kind of wrote off Deion Sanders. A lot of substance, no sizzle, right? I mean, it's just a lot of sizzle, no substance. This year though, I mean, they have a chance, a legitimate chance, to go and play in the Big 12 championship and get one of those automatic berths into the college football playoffs. I mean, it's been a good turnaround. It's been a really good turnaround for Deion Sanders.
Yeah, well, look, I was told by somebody at ASU who was in the administrative side, when Arizona State went to the Big 12, there was a little bit of a sigh of relief, I think, from the university athletic department, that they weren't going to see Oregon, they weren't going to see USC, they weren't going to see Washington. Those were not schools that Arizona State had success against in the last few years, right? Those schools had dominated ASU. And so you've got Kenny Dillingham, who gets a bunch of buy-in, and he's got a quarterback in Sam Leavitt, which was an absolute gift to him, transferring from Michigan State. It's a guy he can really bet on. He's got Cam Scatteraboo at running back. So Arizona State gets traction. Look at what Colorado's got. You've got Shedeur Sanders, who might be, despite all the Heisman talk about Travis Hunter, Shedeur might be the most valuable player on that team. And he probably is. If you lose Travis Hunter, you can win games. You lose Shedeur, you're host if you're Colorado. And so I think he's got a veteran quarterback who understands the system, who knows how to play. In today's world, it's a quarterback-centric game, gives you a chance to win. You've got Hunter on defense. And I think Coach Prime adjusted. Like, he lost his coordinators, and he got a new D coordinator who absolutely has been a win for him. Mm-hmm. The offense looks better, but just like Arizona State, there's no Oregon, there's no Washington, there's no USC on the schedule. And you look at what these wins, they're all games that, like, you would say, hey, it's a coin toss, or Kansas State. You look at the schedule for these two teams, and you kind of go, oh, it makes sense why they're getting better footing. And maybe it makes sense why they wanted to move to the Big 12, where they didn't have to climb over a bunch of teams that had deeper resources than them. And so I think Colorado's in a great position. I 100% think Coach Prime, this is going to be it for him. I think you buy low, you sell high. I think he's a sell high guy. And I think, the stock's never going to be better at Colorado, and they've become an easy team to root for.
NFL, or does he go to Florida State?
I think NFL. I think he's the ultimate youth sports parent who has just followed his kids along the line. He'll go to the NFL and he'll follow Shedeur there and coach him there. That's the prediction. Dallas Cowboys or wherever.
He gives him a ride home, takes him to Burgerville after the game.
Yeah. Well, they're going to dictate where he's drafted. I mean, no doubt. He's going to tell teams, don't draft my kid, just in the same way he'd kind of said as a player. He didn't want to go to Detroit. And, he wanted to be in Atlanta. And so I think you're going to see Shedeur and Coach Prime together. He'll probably try to game it and get Travis Hunter there. I don't know if it works in the NFL, but I think the Colorado thing, Rick George looks smart for hiring him. Sure. He's got to be thinking right now, what do I do after Coach Prime? Because that will leave in its wake a huge divot.
You a Burgerville guy, by the way?
Yeah, I appreciate a good Burgerville burger. Yeah.
The milkshakes, mocha perk shake.
Love
For
it.
anyone has never been to a Burgerville, if you're watching down in, we have them in Vancouver, Washington.
Yeah, you do.
Southwestern Washington, Oregon, Burgerville. You won't be disappointed. It's a great burger.
100%.
It's a great shake, by the way. The guy, Danny Kelly, who I just had on from The Ringer, brought up a good team, the Raiders.
Yeah.
Raiders and Dion. That's just perfect. That would be a marriage made in heaven, man.
It would. It's Vegas, baby.
It is Vegas.
Look, I think it's a good side show, and in some ways maybe his act plays better in the NFL. I mean, he relates well. I don't, with talent, and because he was.
Yeah. What do you think TV deal? That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Do we have any update on a TV? I mean, it was like a month ago or maybe longer than that. You had the story about Octagon. Yeah. Where are we at with the Pac-12 media rights and adding that eighth team?
Yeah, the Pac-12 today confirmed that Octagon is their their media consultant, and I thought it was interesting because we talked about this like 4 weeks ago. It's a done deal. They've got a big player in Octagon on their side. And I thought it was really interesting to kind of watch with the Big 12. They benefited from this Warner Discovery, ESPN, TNT thing where they're getting more linear games. And it just shows that, there's some fluid things out there in the media landscape. The interesting thing for the Pac-12 is going to be, do they divide? Do they bifurcate the basketball rights from the football rights? And traditionally, this has not been done. And I think it's interesting that Octagon is their consultant because Octagon represents the WCC. That's a basketball first conference that used to have Gonzaga. And so now Octagon is representing the Pac-12 with Gonzaga in the fold. So I kind of expect that we could see the Pac-12 say, hey, our football rights are being sold here. Our basketball rights are being sold there. I think if there's more value there, 100% we're going to get it. Then it becomes, who do they add after? Well, I think they're going to look at those media partners and go, okay, who do you want? Because from a strategy standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to go back after Memphis and Tulane and maybe even UNLV and try to add 3 in the next bite, right? Because if you do Memphis, Tulane, UNLV, you destabilize the American. You take 2 teams that are cracking the top 25. You've got 9-win teams there. You certainly make your conference champion look like it's going to get into the playoff in most years, if not all years. And you have this great basketball conference that's also a pretty good football conference. And so there's some strategy there. But I think if the TV partners say, hey, look, those markets don't bring enough value, Tulane, Memphis, then maybe they go back after UNLV and they try to just make this a regional thing that kind of sews together the conference for now. And hey, look, that's that extra member that gets you NCAA compliant. I'll be really curious to see what happens, but 100% Puck, like all realignment, this will be dictated by the TV and the media partners.
How much sway? Have you seen the comments from Lane Kiffin about the college football playoff, about the championship games?
Yes. Yeah.
Where for people that don't know, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss has got 2 losses. Where the discussion among the coaches is some in the SEC don't want to go to the SEC championship game, which is crazy because if you lose it, then you've got 3 losses and losing despite getting to the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
If you lose it, you're likely knocked out of the college football playoff. So he was detailing where there's some coaches like on a chat, a group text saying, hey, Bubba, I don't want to play in that.
Yeah.
What do you make of his comment?
There's been a lot of talk about the championship games in general. Like there's no need for them anymore.
Get rid of them.
Rick
right?
Neuheisel told me just last week, he said that his solution would be, because the TV partners are not going to give those up. They've paid for those games. Like they're not going to be like, okay, just eliminate the game. But his solution would be, forget the conference championship games. Let's have teams 10 through 16 in the playoff rankings play into the tournament. Make them play in games. Instead, you'd have huge audiences. TV would love those games. And, you replace the divot left by the conference championship game by creating the equivalent of a play-in game for the playoff. It helps with that problem because even though the committee's saying they're not going to penalize teams that lose those games, 3 lost teams, and depending on how you lose that game, if you're Alabama and you get boat raced in that game, that changes the narrative on your season. And so it's not just losing the game, it's how you play in that game if you're a 2-loss team. And so I think you're going to see some of that. And in the Big Ten, you have a bigger problem. Oregon is sitting here undefeated with 1 game left on the schedule. It has not clinched a place in the Big Ten title game. These conferences have gotten so big, Puck, there's not enough crossover. They're not playing head-to-head. The tiebreakers don't work. And so you have to go like to tiebreaker 3 or tiebreaker 4. Right now, it's Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, Oregon, all still alive. And I don't even think it's going to get settled after this weekend. And so I think we're going to go into the final week of the season going, gosh, these 16-team and 18-team conferences are just too big because there's no crossover. We don't know who the best teams are. We don't even know who belongs in the conference championship game. So why are you playing it?
You got 5 SEC teams that currently have 2 losses. Longhorns have 1. I mean, listen, this thing's run by the TV networks and Sankey and ESPN. I mean, the TV numbers that involve any team from the SEC just are monstrous. They know that. How many do you think they ultimately try to get in?
Well, they're going to try to get 4 in, right? Yeah. And that's the number they're chasing, and they're doing a lot of pandering. And I find it really interesting as a guy who covered the Pac-12 when everybody had 2 losses. It was a bad conference. Now everybody in the SEC's got 2 losses, and it's, that's real competition. There's just a lot of great teams in that conference, and the narrative is pick what you want it to be. But the SEC's earned a little bit of this because they have won these tournaments. They've been at the top of college football. Georgia, great example of that. The Georgia fans are real nervous, going into last week's game because they lose to Tennessee, they're out, and they feel like they might be the best team in the country. I'll still say this, Puck. When I look at the rankings, I go Oregon, Ohio State, I go Georgia, I go Alabama. Maybe there's one other team in there. Those are the teams that could win it. And so I personally have a hard time when I look at this going, gosh, who do we eliminate if these SEC teams are not supposed to be in it? But that's why you play the regular season. And if you can't finish in the top 2 or 3 spots in your conference, you shouldn't be bellyaching about, our conference was tougher or whatnot. Your conference champion against everybody else's conference champion. We're going to find out who is good. But I will go back to that. When the conference is so big that you don't have crossover, you don't have common opponents, who knows who the best teams are? And everybody's knocking Indiana because their strength of schedule is bad. And I get that, but they don't control that. They might be the best team in America. We don't know.
We'll find out this week.
They're not going to play Oregon, right? So they get Ohio State this week, and maybe we get a glimpse. But I have people in the SEC footprint who are emailing me going, I don't think Oregon's good. I don't think Ohio State's good. They haven't played anybody but each other. And I'm just kind of rolling my eyes going, all right, nothing matters but what the SEC does. That's what we've been told for years.
Yeah, and I get the SEC fatigue. I totally get it. I would just say as a college football viewer that sits, on the couch and watches football and tries to watch as much college football as he can, what I just see a difference in talent, physicality when I watch the SEC play. And I just see with all of the teams that play in that.
Defensive line is where you see it the big. I asked Mike Leach that when he got, to Mississippi State. I said, what's the difference? And he said, in the Pac-12, everybody had maybe one of those guys, or maybe the good teams had 2 of those guys that were going to the NFL on the D line. He said in the SEC, the backups are going to the NFL on the defensive line. Those guys are NFL defensive tackles. And that was the biggest, he said, you can go get quarterbacks. It's the D tackles. We can all see it. And, I also had a university president tell me, as long as we're talking about the SEC and the Big Ten, that the best thing that could happen in this tournament for college football, in particular the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and the ACC, is somebody not in the Big 10 and the SEC to make the championship game and prove that an outlier can punch in there. And even Miami is an outlier punching in there, or somebody like Colorado, if they can get the right matchups, or Boise State getting in there. That would be great for college football, but let's see what happens. And we might have the same old in the Final Four.
Well, and it would just garner more interest, right? Because what we've with all this college football, we've squeezed out the regionality of it. That's what we've done. And so if a Boise State could somehow pull off a miracle and win the whole damn thing, it'd be great.
Well, it'll be matchups though, won't it? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see, like, if Oregon ends up as the 1 seed, or maybe if they lose to Ohio State and they end up as the 5 seed, right? And what the matchups are if you're the 1 seed, who are you playing? Are you playing Boise State, or, does Boise State get the 4 seed? I think we're going to learn a lot about, the 1 seed may have a tougher path than the 5 seed, and not a week, not a week off. And it's just going to be really crazy to kind of see how it lines up. And would you have been better off as the 1 seed or the 5 seed? And that's one of the questions that's hanging out there.
He is John Canzano. He's brought to you by Zeke's Pizza. You can go watch this episode up on YouTube. Subscribe there to YouTube if you haven't done so yet. Also, you can listen to it later on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast. Of course, pucksports.com. Again, Zeke's Pizza brings you John Canzano every single week. You can follow John on Twitter, /X, John Canzano BFT. Also on Blue Sky, John Canzano, on all of his work up at johncanzano.com. Listen to the radio show at 7:50, the game down there in Portland. What do you got cooking at johncanzano.com right now?
I just posted a column this morning that, you look, if you need a heartwarming human interest story, it's about a reader who is a diehard reader of johncanzano.com, who 89-year-old woman, diehard college football fan. She passed away. I got a letter from her son. I didn't know she was out there. And I got a letter from her son. It just broke my heart. I wrote about her and the connection that we all have with sports. Her son was, as she's in her 80s, she's widowed, she's alone. And what does she have to talk about with her son? She talked about sports radio, and she read my column and would call her son and say, hey, did you read this? And it would give him something to talk about. And so it's a reminder amid all this ugliness and the money and the realignment that the stuff that brings us together is still the sports, and it's still working.
Nothing brings people together more than sports.
Yeah, I agree.
Nothing. All right, John, we'll talk. Hey, not next week, Thanksgiving. We're going to give the Thanksgiving week off for all of our audience at pucksports.com.
Okay.
One, because I'm leaving town. So you enjoy. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Pumpkin or pecan?
Pecan.
Yeah, good call. White or dark?
Either. I'm not picky there.
Yeah.
Take them both. Good gravy, though. Good gravy. Got to win with gravy.
Best side?
Really good stuffing. Or my mom makes this Jello that almost should be a dessert. That's got fruit
in it, and
fruit and whipped cream, and it almost should be a dessert. I mean, frankly, but I almost use it like cranberry sauce with the turkey.
Okay. All right. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. Take care.
There he is, John Canzano, johncanzano.com. Go read all of his work up there. Listen to the radio show at the Bald Faced Truth down there in Portland, Oregon.